Misan Park had been living on the colony of Kethra 7 for 3 years, and she loved her work more than she loved anything else. She was a biologist, and her job was to study the plants and animals on this strange world far away from Earth. The colony was a safe place, surrounded by tall walls and protected by good security. It was peaceful here, and the people who lived here got along well with each other. Misan worked in a small office in the colony, but she spent most of her time in the laboratories looking at samples through microscopes and taking notes about what she found. She was careful in her work and paid attention to every small detail. The other people in the colony liked her because she was kind and always ready to help when someone needed something. On one afternoon, Misan decided to take a break from her work and go to the cafeteria to make lunch. She was hungry after working all morning, and she wanted something simple and good to eat. The cafeteria was not busy at that time of day, so she had the place all to herself. She walked to the food station and started to collect what she needed. First, she took 2 pieces of bread from the shelf. The bread was fresh and smelled nice. Then she picked up some processed meat from the cold storage. She chose a good piece, one that was not too thick and not too thin. Next, she got some yellow cheese and a few fresh vegetables. She had tomatoes, lettuce, and onions. Everything was clean and ready to use. Misan moved to a clean table near the big window that looked out at the colony grounds. The window was made of special transparent material that was very strong. Outside, she could see the training field where some workers were doing their jobs, and beyond that, there was the fence that protected the colony from the wild world outside. She started to put her lunch together with care. First, she spread a thin layer of something on one piece of bread. Then she laid the meat down in a neat way, making sure each piece covered the bread evenly. She added the cheese on top of the meat. The cheese was yellow and bright, and it looked nice against the lighter-colored meat. Then she put the vegetables on the cheese, arranging them so they looked good. The red tomato, the green lettuce, and the white onion pieces all came together in a nice pattern. Finally, she placed the second piece of bread on top. She cut the sandwich in half so it would be easier to eat. The 2 pieces fell apart just a little bit, so she could see all the layers inside. It looked perfect. Misan picked up half of the sandwich and brought it to her mouth. She took a bite and felt happy. The bread was soft, the meat was flavorful, the cheese was creamy, and the vegetables were fresh and made the whole thing taste better. She closed her eyes for a second and enjoyed the simple pleasure of good food made with care. That was when she saw them. 3 pairs of amber eyes were looking at her through the window. They were large eyes, glowing with a strange light. Below those eyes were long mouths filled with teeth that shined white. The creatures were tall and covered in scales that looked like dark blue metal. They had strong arms with long claws and thick legs that looked like they could run very fast. These were the Vrexthar. They were the top hunters on this planet, the creatures that everyone in the colony had been taught to fear and avoid. They lived outside the colony walls, in the forests and mountains beyond the fence. The colony had been told not to bother them, and they had not bothered the colony, at least not yet. Misan felt her heart start to beat faster. The safety training she had received told her to stay still, do not run, and press the alarm button if any Vrexthar came too close. But these creatures were not attacking. They were just standing there, watching her eat her sandwich. The largest of the 3 cubs tilted its head to one side. It made a soft clicking sound, and the other 2 cubs made the same sound back. They were not making aggressive noises. They sounded curious, the way that younger creatures often sound when they see something new and interesting. Misan did something that she would later understand was very brave, or maybe very foolish. She did not press the alarm button. Instead, she looked directly at the largest cub and kept eating her sandwich. She took another bite, and this time she did it slowly, making sure the creature could see what she was doing. She closed her eyes for just a moment, letting her face show that she was enjoying the food. Then, while the cub was still watching, Mi-sun smiled. It was a small smile, not a big one, just a gentle expression of happiness and peace. The cub made another clicking sound, but this time it was different. The sound seemed to come from deep inside the creature's body. The other two cubs looked at the first cub and made similar sounds. They stayed where they were, pressed against the window, watching as Mi-sun finished her lunch. After she was done eating, Mi-sun cleaned up her table and threw away the pieces of bread crust in the waste bin. When she looked back at the window, the three Vrexthar were still there, but now they seemed to be talking to each other in their clicking language. They looked at her one more time, and then they turned and walked away toward the forest. Mi-sun sat down in a chair and realized that her hands were shaking a little bit. She was not sure what had just happened. Had she just made a connection with an alien species? Had she done something that would get her in trouble with the colony leaders? Or had she just witnessed something that nobody had ever seen before? She decided to write down everything that had happened in her personal log. She wrote about what the cubs looked like, how they acted, and what the clicking sounds they made sounded like. She wrote about how they had watched her eat, and how she had smiled at them. She wrote about how they had walked away peacefully. When director Tae-ho Kim came to find her an hour later, Mi-sun was still sitting at her desk, thinking about those amber eyes and that curious head tilt. She did not tell him about the Vrexthar cubs right away. She wanted to understand what had happened first. She wanted to think about it and make sure she understood it correctly. But she knew that something had changed on Kethris 7, even if she did not know exactly what. She had made contact with the top predators of this world, and they had not attacked her. They had simply watched her prepare her food, and they had seemed fascinated by what they saw. The question was, what would they do tomorrow? The next day, Mi-sun came to the cafeteria again at the same time. She was nervous because she did not know if the Vrexthar cubs would return. She also did not know if she should tell someone about what had happened. But something inside her told her to keep this meeting secret, at least for now. She felt like she was supposed to do this. She made another sandwich just like the day before. She chose fresh bread, good meat, nice cheese, and clean vegetables. She arranged everything carefully on the bread, making sure each layer was nice and neat. When the sandwich was ready, she walked to the same table by the window and sat down. For almost 10 minutes, nothing happened. Mi-sun started to eat her sandwich, and she wondered if the cubs had just been passing by yesterday. Maybe they had been curious for only a moment and would never come back again. But then she saw them again. This time there were not 3 cubs. There were 5. The original 3 were there, and 2 more had come with them. The new cubs were smaller, younger than the first 3. They all pressed their faces against the window, and their amber eyes shined bright. Mi-sun's heart moved with joy and also with fear. She did not know why these creatures were so interested in her eating, but she decided to keep doing what she was doing. She continued to eat slowly and carefully, making sure each bite was done with intention. She wanted them to see that she was taking time and care with her food. The largest cub, the one she had named Keth in her mind, made that same deep, clicking sound. This time, it sounded like it was teaching the smaller cubs something. The little ones made similar sounds back, like they were learning from their older friend. Mi-sun finished her sandwich and again smiled at the creatures through the window. This time, she also raised her hand slowly and moved it in a gentle wave. The cubs did not run away. Instead, they stayed and watched as she got up and cleaned her area. Over the next few weeks, this became a routine. Every afternoon, Mi-sun would come to the cafeteria and make lunch. Every afternoon, more and more Vrexthar cubs would come to watch her eat. Word seemed to spread among the young creatures that there was something interesting to see near the colony. On the 3rd week, something new happened. Mi-sun decided to make her lunch more interesting. She prepared not just a sandwich, but also some roasted meat with herbs. She had taken time to cook the meat with special spices that made it smell amazing. She put it on a plate and arranged it carefully, showing the different colors and textures. When the cubs saw this, they made sounds that were louder and more excited than before. There were now about 15 cubs of different ages pressed against the window. They clicked and chirped to each other, and some of them seemed to be jumping up and down with excitement. Mi-sun realized that they were not just watching her eat. They were studying how she prepared the food. They were paying attention to every movement she made, every choice she made about how to arrange things on the plate. One afternoon, Director Tae-ho Kim came to find her in the cafeteria. He looked surprised to see so many Vrexthar cubs outside the window. His face became worried and serious. "Mi-sun, what is this?" he asked. His voice sounded concerned. "Why are there so many of them here? This could be dangerous. These are predators. This is against protocol." Mi-sun looked at him with calm eyes. "They are not dangerous, Director Kim. They are just curious. They come every day and watch me eat. They have not tried to hurt anyone. They have not tried to break through the window. They just watch." "Just watch?" Director Kim said with doubt in his voice. "That seems strange and dangerous. I should report this to security. They need to know what is happening." But Mi-sun touched his arm gently. "Director Kim, please, give me one more week. Please just give me one more week to understand what is happening here. I think something important is taking place. These creatures, they are learning something. They seem to understand something. Please let me continue." Director Kim looked at her and then at the cubs outside the window. After a moment, he nodded slowly. "1 week, Mi-sun. But then I must report this." During that 1 week, Mi-sun started to narrate what she was doing while she prepared her food. She did not think the cubs could understand her words, but she wanted to see if they could understand her meaning. She would speak as she arranged the meat on the plate. "This is the protein," she would say in a slow voice. "It is good. It is important. We must respect it." She would move the meat carefully and show it to the cubs. "We take time to prepare it. We do not rush. We show respect." Then she would add the vegetables. "These plants grow from the earth. They make the food better. They make it complete." The cubs would watch and listen. Some of them would make clicking sounds in response, as if they were trying to understand her words or repeat what she was saying. One young female cub, smaller than the others, made a sound that was different from the rest. Mi-sun heard something in that sound. It was like the cub was trying to say something back to her, trying to communicate across the barrier between them. Mi-sun put her hand against the window. The small female cub put her clawed hand against the window too, in the same place. They stood like that for a moment, both creatures reaching out toward each other across the glass. That night, Mi-sun knew that she could not keep this secret anymore. She had to report what was happening, but she also knew that what the Vrexthar cubs were learning from watching her was important. It was changing them in some way that she did not fully understand. When she finally told Director Kim everything, his worried expression turned into an expression of amazement. He listened to her story about the cubs coming back day after day, about their interest in how she prepared her food, about the sounds they made and the way they seemed to understand her meaning. "This is first contact," he said quietly. "This is real first contact with an intelligent species, and it is happening through sandwich making." Mi-sun nodded. She had realized the same thing. But now she wondered what would happen next. Would the colony try to stop the meetings? Would they try to drive the cubs away? Or would they understand, like she did, that something beautiful and important was happening? The answer would come soon enough. But for now, Mi-sun knew that the next time she made lunch, the cubs would be waiting, and she would continue to show them something that their wild nature had never known before: the art and importance of preparing food with intention and care. 3 months had passed since the first day that Mi-sun saw the amber eyes at her window. The colony had not stopped her from continuing her daily meals. Instead, something surprising had happened. The colony leaders had decided to let her continue, but they wanted to study what was taking place. They wanted to understand why the Vrexthar cubs kept returning and what they were learning. Dr. Hae-Jin Lee was the colony's chief scientist, and she was very interested in this situation. She started to take notes about the cubs' behavior. She watched them through cameras that had been set up near the cafeteria window. She recorded their sounds and their movements. She wrote down everything that happened during each meal. What Dr. Lee discovered was surprising and wonderful. The cubs were changing, not just in small ways, but in big and important ways. Before Mi-sun had started making her meals, the Vrexthar cubs had been wild and violent with each other. The colony's security cameras had recorded many fights among them. The older and stronger cubs would attack the younger and weaker ones to show who was in charge. The cubs fought over food and over space. It was the way of predators. The strong took what they wanted from the weak. But after 3 months of watching Mi-sun prepare her food, something different started to happen in the Vrexthar settlement outside the colony walls. The cubs stopped fighting in the old way. Instead, they started to do something new. They would hunt animals from the forest, just like before, but then they would do something that nobody expected. They would carry the meat back to their camp and arrange it carefully on rocks and pieces of bark. They arranged the meat in patterns. Some of the patterns looked like the layers of Mi-sun's sandwiches. Some patterns looked like the careful arrangements of roasted meat that she had shown them. The cubs worked together, taking time to place each piece of meat just right. They were not rushing. They were not fighting. The young cubs called these arrangements human meals. When a cub finished making a human meal, other cubs would come and look at it. They would make sounds that seemed like approval or praise. The maker of the meal would seem proud. It was different from anything the Vrexthar had ever done before. Dr. Hae-Jin Lee watched all of this through the cameras and through reports that the security team brought her. She started to count how often the cubs fought. She kept careful records. In the first 3 months, the young Vrexthar had violent fighting between them about 40 times a day. But as the weeks went on, the fighting became less and less common. By the end of the first month of watching this new behavior, the fighting had dropped to less than 10 times a day. By the second month, it was down to almost nothing. One afternoon, Dr. Lee came to the cafeteria where Mi-sun was eating her lunch. The Vrexthar cubs were at their usual spot by the window. Dr. Lee had a tablet in her hand with information on it. Mi-sun, look at this, Dr. Lee said. She showed the tablet to Mi-sun. These are the records of violent incidents among the Vrexthar cubs in the area. 3 months ago, we recorded 284 violent incidents in just 1 month. Do you know how many we recorded last month? No, Mi-sun said. How many? 62, Dr. Lee said. 62. That is a 78% reduction in violence. And it happened slowly, starting right around the time you began making your sandwiches. It is like you taught them something about civilization. About controlling their wild nature. Mi-sun was quiet for a moment. She had not thought about it that way. She had just wanted to share something that she loved, the simple pleasure of preparing food with care and attention. She had not thought about how it might change an entire species. But there is something else, Dr. Lee continued. She looked very serious. The older Vrexthar, the adult ones in the settlement, they have noticed what the cubs are doing. They are watching. And they are starting to do it too. Mi-sun's eyes became wide. The adults are making human meals? Not exactly like you do it, Dr. Lee said. But they are arranging their food carefully. They are teaching the cubs to do it properly. They are making rituals out of it. It is becoming part of their culture, Mi-sun. You have changed how an entire species hunts and eats. Over the next few weeks, this change became even more obvious. The Vrexthar settlement outside the colony walls was different now. The hunters would bring down their prey, just like before, but then instead of fighting over the meat, they would work together to prepare it. They would bring it back to the central area of their camp and arrange it on large stones. The arrangements became more complex and more beautiful. Some of them had patterns. Some of them mixed different types of meat and showed different colors and shapes. The Vrexthar seemed to take pride in these arrangements. They would gather around and make their clicking and chirping sounds, as if they were celebrating the work. Young cubs would watch the adults and learn how to do it properly. Older Vrexthar would teach them to be patient, to think about how to arrange things, to show respect for the hunt and for the food. One day, something unexpected happened. A group of adult Vrexthar came to the colony fence. They were carrying a large arrangement of meat on a flat piece of bark. The arrangement was the most beautiful and complex thing that anyone had seen. It showed different types of meat arranged in patterns that seemed almost like art. They placed the bark plate on the ground outside the fence gate. Then they made deep, loud clicking sounds that seemed to call for Mi-sun to come out. Director Kim and Dr. Lee looked at each other with worry. But Mi-sun stood up and walked to the gate. She opened it slowly and walked out to look at the arrangement. It was beautiful. It showed respect and care. Every piece of meat had been chosen and placed with intention. The colors and textures worked together in a way that was almost like music made visible. The oldest-looking Vrexthar, a large creature with scars on his scales, stepped forward. He made a sound that was low and deep, and seemed to come from his entire body. Then he gestured toward the arrangement, and then toward Mi-sun. Dr. Lee, who had stepped closer, said quietly, "I think he is saying thank you. I think he is trying to thank you for teaching his people something new." Mi-sun felt tears come to her eyes. She had not meant to change this species. She had only wanted to eat her lunch. But somehow, by showing the Vrexthar that food was more than just fuel, that it could be prepared with thought and art and respect, she had shown them a path to something they had always been capable of, but had never discovered on their own. The large Vrexthar turned and walked back toward the forest. The other adults followed, but the cubs stayed a little longer, their amber eyes watching Mi-sun through the fence. That night, the Colony Council held a meeting. They talked about what was happening with the Vrexthar. Some people wanted to be careful and make sure that this change was safe. Others wanted to study it more. But everyone agreed on one thing. Mi-sun Park had done something important. She had made first contact with an intelligent species in a way that nobody had expected. She had done it with nothing but patience, care, and a simple meal. 1 year after that first sandwich, everything had changed on Kethris 7. The colony was no longer a place that hid behind walls and feared the creatures outside. Instead, it had become a place where two different species were learning from each other and building something new together. The Vrexthar had embraced the human way, as they called it. This was not just about how they prepared their food. It had become a whole way of thinking about life and about their place in their world. Instead of just surviving, they were now creating a culture. They had rituals and traditions. They had art and beauty in the way they did things. The hunting parties changed too. Before, the Vrexthar hunters would go out in a chaotic group, each one trying to catch the most food for themselves. Now they worked together with planning and strategy. They would discuss which animals to hunt and why. They would make sure that they did not hunt too many of one kind of animal. They understood that they needed to keep balance in their world. When they brought down an animal, the process of turning it into food became a ceremony. The hunters would stop and show respect for what they had killed. They would speak words in their own language that seemed to honor the animal's life and its death. Then they would begin the careful work of preparing the meat. The Vrexthar elders, led by the large scarred male that Mi-sun had seen at the fence, decided that they needed to understand more about this human way of thinking. They sent a request to the Colony Council. They wanted to meet with the humans and talk about the philosophy behind the preparation of food. Director Tae-ho Kim received this request and was amazed. This was real communication between two intelligent species. This was a meeting that would affect the future of both peoples. The council agreed to meet with the Vrexthar leaders. They prepared a special room in the colony center, a place where humans and Vrexthar could sit together and talk. The room was large and had good ventilation because the Vrexthar had a different way of breathing that produced unusual scents. When the Vrexthar leaders arrived, they came not with weapons, but with gifts. They carried beautiful arrangements of carefully prepared foods. These were human meals, as they called them, but made by Vrexthar hands and Vrexthar minds. Each arrangement was different and showed different ideas about how to combine and present food. The oldest leader, whose name in their language sounded like Vreth, stood before the council, and the humans gathered there. He was a large creature, tall and powerful, but his movements were calm and controlled. Through a translation device, he spoke. "We have learned something important from your kind," Vreth said. His voice was deep and came from somewhere in his large body. "We have learned that predators do not have to be savage. We have learned that there is strength in thinking about what we do. There is power in intention. There is honor in craft." Director Kim stood and bowed slightly. "We are honored to share this knowledge with you. We did not know that you would understand it so completely." "Understanding comes when the teacher is patient and kind," Vreth said. "Your scientist, Mi-sun Park, was both these things. She did not tell us how to behave. She showed us a better way by being herself. This is true teaching." Mi-sun felt her heart become very full when she heard these words. She had not thought of herself as a teacher. She had just been making lunch. Over the next months, the cooperation between the humans and Vrexthar grew stronger. The colony opened its gates more often. Vrexthar hunters worked alongside human hunters, and together they learned from each other. The humans learned about tracking and understanding animal behavior from the Vrexthar. The Vrexthar learned about planning and balance from the humans. A space was created between the colony and the Vrexthar settlement, where both species could meet and work together. It became a place of learning and exchange. Humans taught Vrexthar about cooking and about different ways to prepare food from around the galaxy. Vrexthar taught humans about the spiritual meaning of the hunt and the sacred relationship between hunter and hunted. Young Vrexthar wanted to learn human languages. Young humans wanted to understand Vrexthar culture and thinking. Schools were started where both species could learn together. The human children were not afraid of the Vrexthar anymore because they grew up learning about them from young. The young Vrexthar learned about human history and art and philosophy. One of the most surprising changes was that the Vrexthar began to create art based on the preparation of food. They created sculptures that showed the arrangement of meat in beautiful patterns. They composed music that seemed to describe the process of taking raw material and transforming it into something meaningful. They even started a form of poetry where they used food arrangements as metaphors for life and death and change. But perhaps the most important change was that the Vrexthar stopped seeing humans as food. This was something that the humans had always feared, though they tried not to show it. But as the Vrexthar understood more about human thinking and human philosophy, they began to see humans as something much more valuable. They saw them as teachers and friends and fellow thinkers. Governor Kaewon Park, who was not related to Mi-sun but shared her last name, made an announcement to the entire colony and the Vrexthar settlement. She stood in the meeting place and spoke to both species. "We are no longer two peoples separated by fear and walls," she said. "We have become one community with two faces. We have learned from each other. We have grown together. The day when Mi-sun Park made a sandwich started something that will change the future, not just of our worlds, but of the stars themselves. Because now other worlds will know that predatory species can change." that civilization can grow not through force, but through patient teaching and mutual respect. The announcement was met with sounds of celebration from both humans and Vrexthar, the clicking and chirping of the Vrexthar mixed with human cheering and applause. It was a sound that had never been heard before on Kethris 7. That evening, there was a feast. Humans and Vrexthar sat together and shared food. Some of the food was prepared the human way. Some of it was arranged in the Vrexthar style. Many of the dishes were made together, combining techniques from both cultures. The food was delicious and beautiful and meaningful. Mi-sun sat at a table with Keth, the first cub she had ever seen at her window. Keth was larger now, almost grown into an adult. But the cub still had the same curious mind that had first brought him to watch her make that sandwich so long ago. "What will happen now?" Keth asked, his voice rumbling softly. His words were still rough because he was still learning human language, but they were clear enough to understand. Mi-sun looked at her old friend and smiled. "Now," she said. "Now we go forward together. Now we learn what we can build when two species work together. Now we discover what the future can be." 5 years had passed since Mi-sun made that first sandwich that changed everything. The colony on Kethris 7 was no longer just a human settlement on an alien world. It had become something much more important. It had become a place where two species had learned to understand each other and to respect each other. It had become a symbol of what could be achieved when different peoples chose to communicate instead of to fight. The joint colony had grown very large. New buildings had been built to house both humans and Vrexthar. Schools and libraries had been created. A great meeting hall stood at the center, where leaders from both species could discuss plans for the future. There were workshops where artists and craftspeople worked together, creating beautiful things. Mi-sun had become something that she never expected to be. She had become famous not just on Kethris 7, but across human space. Her story had been told on news broadcasts and in schools. People wanted to know about the woman who had changed the course of history with a sandwich. On this day, Mi-sun stood before an assembly of both humans and Vrexthar. The great meeting hall was filled with people and creatures. The council had decided to make an announcement, and Mi-sun had been asked to speak. 5 years ago, she began, I had no idea that making lunch would lead to this. I was simply a biologist who loved to prepare food with care. I did not know that I would become a teacher. I did not know that an entire species would change because of what I did. She paused and looked out at the crowd. She could see both human faces and Vrexthar faces watching her. She could see friendships between the species. She could see families that included both kinds of people. What I learned, Mi-sun continued, is that understanding comes not from big words or complicated ideas. Understanding comes from sharing simple moments. It comes from showing who you are through your actions. It comes from having patience and kindness. Director Kim and Dr. Lee stood near her, and they were smiling. Even Vreth, the old leader of the Vrexthar, was there. He made a soft clicking sound that seemed like approval. Mi-sun had been offered many important positions over the years. She had been asked to be a research director, a teacher, a government official, but she had chosen a different role. She had become what people called the chief cultural ambassador. Her job was not just to teach or to direct. Her job was to help other peoples understand each other. She traveled to different parts of the colony and to other settlements, helping to build bridges between humans and Vrexthar and sometimes other species that had come to Kethris 7. One of the most important things that had happened was that the Vrexthar had decided to send their own exploratory missions to other worlds. But these were not missions of conquest. These were missions of cultural exchange. The Vrexthar wanted to share what they had learned with other species in the galaxy. Scholar Il-sung Ko had written a book about all of this. It was called The Sandwich Philosophy: How One Woman Changed the Galaxy. The book told the story of how Mi-sun had shown the Vrexthar that civilization was not something that one species had and another did not have. Civilization was something that all intelligent species could discover within themselves. Other predatory species will face the same choices that the Vrexthar faced, Il Sung Ko had written. Will they remain savages in the eyes of the galaxy, or will they discover that they too can find meaning and beauty in the world? The answer, as Mi-sun Park showed us, is that it is not about what species you are. It is about whether you are willing to see things in a new way. The Vrexthar explorers had started their journeys. They carried with them not weapons, but knowledge. They carried recordings of Mi-sun making her meals. They carried examples of Vrexthar art that had been inspired by the philosophy of intentional creation. They carried stories of how a whole species had changed. When they met other species, they would show these things. They would say, "We were once like you are. We were wild and without culture." Then we learned something important. We learned that strength is not just in teeth and claws. Strength is in thinking. Strength is in intention. Strength is in working together. Some species listened and began to change. Some did not. But the very fact that peaceful contact was possible between so many different kinds of creatures was something that had never been possible before. Back on Kethris 7, life went on in quiet, beautiful ways. Mi-sun had kept the same small apartment that she had always had. She did not need more. She did not want more. In the evening, she would go to her small kitchen and prepare her meals just like she always had. Sometimes she would have visitors. Sometimes young humans would come, wanting to learn her cooking techniques. Sometimes young Vrexthar would come, still curious about how she arranged food. Keth was now a full adult, and he had become one of the leaders of the Vrexthar community. He had even started to prepare his own meals in a way that mixed human techniques with Vrexthar traditions. He had created something new, something that belonged to neither species completely, but to both at the same time. One evening, as the sun set over Kethris 7, Director Tae-ho Kim came to find Mi-sun at her favorite place by the window overlooking the colony grounds. Through that window, they could see human buildings and Vrexthar dwellings living side by side. They could see children of both species playing together. They could see hunters and farmers and artists and teachers going about their work together. "Do you think it will last?" Director Kim asked her. It was the same question he had asked her many years ago. "Do you think this peace and this philosophy will continue? Will other species be able to do what the Vrexthar have done?" Mi-sun smiled, just like she had smiled at those first 3 cubs at her window so long ago. "I think," she said carefully, "that once a species discovers that intention and craft and thought matter more than raw power, they do not easily forget it. You cannot unlearn civilization. You cannot pretend that beauty and art and meaning do not matter once you have seen them." She paused and looked out at the world they had helped to create together. "We did not invent civilization for the Vrexthar," she continued. "We just reminded them that they were always capable of it. Every species has that capability inside them. Some just need someone to show them that it is possible. Some just need to see someone taking time and care to prepare a simple meal." That night, across the colony, both humans and Vrexthar gathered to share meals. Some were prepared the human way, arranged carefully with attention to presentation. Some were arranged as the traditional Vrexthar human meals, stacked with meaning and intention. Many were a beautiful mix of both traditions, showing what could be created when 2 cultures learned from each other. As they ate together, they talked and laughed and shared stories. The clicking and chirping of Vrexthar language mixed with human speech. Music played from both cultures, sometimes from different instruments, sometimes blended together in new ways that neither species had created alone. The universe would never fully know how close the worlds of humans and Vrexthar had come to conflict. It would never know the wars that could have happened, the fear that could have ruled, the violence that could have destroyed everything. But it would know the story of the woman who made a sandwich and changed the course of history. It would know that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness and intention could create the largest changes. It would know that predators of different species with different bodies and different instincts could learn to live together and build something beautiful. And somewhere, in a small kitchen on a distant world, someone would make a sandwich with care and intention, thinking of Mi-Sun Park. And they would remember that civilization starts not with force or fear, but with showing others that we are all capable of more than we know.